Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Genevieve Skory, a transformational speaker and resilience coach who helps entrepreneurs survive the mental game of business. She is incredibly open about the fact that she hasn't just studied resilience, she's had to build it while facing the frustration of unmet goals and the genuine temptation to give up. She's here to share how she turned those sleepless nights into a system called resilience mapping that helps others stop spinning their wheels and start thriving. So, Genevieve, it's a pleasure to welcome you to FailCraft today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk and have a
Yeah,
discussion around this.
it's great to have you here. Let's dive in. You help entrepreneurs navigate the highs and lows, but you admit that you understand the struggles because you've been there. So you specifically mentioned the frustration of unmet goals and the temptation to give up. So can you take us back to that specific moment in your own journey where, that temptation to quit was strongest? So what did that point look like for you?
Just one? You just want one time that happened? I would tell you I would tell you that is I think for most entrepreneurs, I think that is a bit of a regular occurrence that we get to I will mention one specific time, but I do want to normalize for people this notion that it's always sunshine and rainbows. I think every entrepreneur on a weekly basis has this notion that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should quit. The difference is some of us learn to ignore that little voice or
Mm,
to see it as a sign of growth, and other people are a little distracted by it. For me, I will tell you, I have always been a bit of a type A personality, and I have always been very driven. So, this notion that, hey, I'm going to chase the next thing, or I want this status, or I'm willing to fly by the seat of my pants just to make it happen, those are all things that are definitely attributes for some, but it's also a little bit of a handicap if it's overutilized. So for me, what ended up happening was I have worked both as an entrepreneur several times and as a corporate executive. And what I learned the hard way was when you are not really clearly aligned with who you are. So, for example, in a corporate role, as like I was the chief sales executive for a $350 million brand, and I worked my way up in this business, 7 years in this company, working really hard. I loved what we did. I loved the people I worked with. But I was so committed to just this focused outcome that I missed so much joy in my life, in the connections with other people, because there was this huge fear of failing and not hitting those goals. And business isn't easy. It's really not easy. Everybody says like, "Hey, it's okay to fail." But in reality, it's not. Like, depending depending on where you work, it's really not okay to fail. And so what you have to do is set up some systems that keep you aligned, that keep you excited, that keep you focused on the things that make you wanna show up day after day. So for me, it was kinda like realizing that my mom was getting older. She's 87 years old. She doesn't have the greatest health in the world. She needed to live with us for a couple of years while I was working, and I always felt this personal tug to be more attentive to her, but because of my role and this expectation, it really created a lot of conflict for me internally. And it wasn't until I left that role that I really began to realize, wow, I'd actually lost. And I'm not saying just because of that company, but because of so many decades of hustling and driving and not having the resilience support that I needed. I think it took me a long time to kind of detox and recover from that, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? It's a kind of a long story.
Yeah, yeah, it does answer the question. So, Genevieve, you talk about the mental game being the missing piece. So, for you, when you were struggling, was there a mental trap or lie you were telling yourself about your own failure?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time pushing off my goalposts. Like I was always moving the goalpost. So it's kind of like we hit a particular goal. We didn't really celebrate, we just moved the goalpost, it's like, "Well, that's okay, but we have something else to do. That's okay, but we have something else to do." And every successful moment that I had tied to something in the future. So I never really had this sense of personal success because I'd always pushed and moved the goalposts out. So, what I was telling myself was I needed to keep hustling, I needed to keep pushing, that the future is where my happiness lies. When I hit this goal, when this happens, when that happens, then I can be happy, successful, rest, calm down, all the things. But your body doesn't really work that way.
All right, Genevieve, you have this provocative topic. So, it says, why goals don't work. So I'd like to know, did traditional goal setting actually set you up for failure during that difficult time? And also, how did you have to change your approach?
Yeah. So traditional goals are about a lot of times they're about productivity and many more times it's about financial success. So a lot of people set goals based on sales, based on X amount of something happening. And what it doesn't take into consideration is the work the person has to do to become the person that achieves those goals. So, for example, if I set a really big goal, the problem is my brain immediately says, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. That's right. Sure. Sure you haven't tripled your sales ever, but this year we're going to triple the sales without actually having a plan
Mm.
or something new. And so the brain immediately says, "No, no." There's a mismatch between what your brain says you're capable of and the person you have to be to get 3 times the productivity or 3 times the sales. So, what you have to really do is you have to do a couple different things. The first thing you have to do is you have to set goals that are slightly outside of your comfort zone. Your brain will allow you to consider something out slightly outside of your comfort zone, but the more it is outside of the comfort zone, the less likely it is that you're going to actually achieve that. So what'll happen is you'll self-sabotage. What'll happen is you won't be motivated to show up. What'll happen is you'll start to make excuses for why that can't happen. And those are all just protective mechanisms for the brain. So when people set really big goals, they need to be somewhat more supportive in terms of, okay, so in order to achieve, like, let's just say you were like in a position where you're like, I am going to get 3 times the goals, 3 times the sales. Okay, great. Now we need to break down who do you need to become to make that happen? In other words, what aren't you doing now that you need to do at a capacity that's going to generate 3 times more sales? Then I think it is really important. I know it's really important for you to find daily goals that you are in complete control of that allow you to keep showing up and telling your brain, I am winning, so that you show up more and in a different way than you did, so that you get those better results. So, in other words, if I'm not going to change anything about how I show up, who I show up with, who I'm talking to, the products or services that I'm selling, if I'm not going to change any of that, then why do I actually think I'm going to get 3 times the sales? You've got to re-engineer it. You've got to ask yourself better questions so that your brain starts to look for the right answers around like who do I need to become? Okay, maybe I need to be better at generating new business conversations. Okay. How many did you do in the past? We need to triple that. Is it likely that you have enough time and capacity to triple that? The answer is either yes or no. If the answer is no and you're really serious about that goal, then you have to figure out how can I get more resources? Am I going to hire new salespeople? Am I going to work triple the time? Well, I just said I wasn't. So, okay, I don't have the capacity to work more. I've got to find more salespeople. Great. Then on a day to day basis, what are we measuring for those people? And a lot of times people, they're like, "Oh, I'll measure sales." And I'm like, "Well, you should measure sales." But there's a lot of byproducts beforehand that have to be achieved in order to get those sales. And if you're just measuring the sales, you don't really know how productive somebody is. So for me, what I figured out was the thing that really floated my boat was connecting with new people every single day. So I started to keep track of how many quality connections did I have in the course of the day. And if I knew that if I could have 5 or 6 quality connected calls or interactions, then at the end of the week, the month, the year, I was very likely to hit my sales goals. So that's one difference in terms of how people typically set up. It's very tactical, but there's an actual element of it that's emotional that very rarely gets taken into consideration.
All right, all right. So, Genevieve, you've developed what you call resilience mapping. So, can you tell us what it's about, and also what was the first map you drew for yourself to navigate out of chaos?
Yeah. So resilience mapping is a system to create the required emotional support that's needed to get to your next level. So if we know that your brain is wired for safety, and it is, then growth really puts a person into their fight or flight brain, which is that amygdala, which is thinking of anything except growth. It wants everything to be the same. It wants to have predictability. It wants you to do what you did yesterday, whether or not it worked, because history says that didn't kill you. So just keep being who you are. So when we talk about resilience mapping, it's based on evaluating your values, because I know that there's a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of distraction. People can actually adopt other people's values subconsciously. So if I'm always scrolling the internet and I'm seeing all these people in really nice cars and jets, and if you were to believe everything you see on the internet, everybody's making $1 million except you. Everybody's having record sales except you. You start to adopt a different set of values. Maybe you're not in it to make $1 million. Maybe you're not in it to have a private jet, but all of a sudden you find yourself pretty obsessed with things that aren't really aligned with who you are. So we start foundationally with, what things do you really value? What do you really want to work for? Why do you want to do those things? And for most people, it's deeply personal, but we take on so many jobs and roles, And we never ask the question, except for the money part, right? When you ask people, like, what do you love about your job? Or why did you move jobs? 9 times out of 10, people say, well, I needed more challenge. I needed more money. And, you really don't ask the question, well, how does that align with your values? How does it align with the values? Because if it doesn't align with your values, you're going to have motivational trouble. So, step number one is we got to be very clear on what our top values are. And then we also have to be very, very clear on why those things connect to the work that we are doing. So, that's kind of step number one. Step number two is to create a support system where you have people in your life that are there to keep you accountable to living according to your values and continue to push you just a little outside of your comfort zone, knowing that your default position would be it's okay to kind of remain the same. So we talk about who are your support people? What does that support look like? You got to get commitments from them. You have to tell them exactly the kind of support you expect from them. And then you got to set up a regularly scheduled connection time where they're gonna go over the things you said you were gonna do and when you were gonna do them and how you did them. So it really is about also having a support system, knowing that it's kind of difficult to break through. It's not kind of, it is. It's difficult to break through to that next level. And then step number three is not wasting good failing, not wasting good failing. So the biggest lie in the world is that failing is bad for you, when indeed failure is the most expensive feedback you're ever going to be privy to. But we waste our failure on not writing it down and asking what we learned from it, what we learned from it. And I know everybody knows the stories about Thomas Edison and the thousands of times the man tried to create the light bulb,
Yeah.
but he notoriously wrote down every failure and every learning point from that failure. So none of that trying was wasted. It became the very next thing that was going to propel him to his next step. So you got to create a feedback collection system, and then you have to evaluate that feedback on a regular basis. So those are all parts of the things that go into resilience mapping, as well as Ezekiel, a habit of revisiting your map on a regular basis. And I will say this until I'm blue in the face, because there's just too much noise out there for most people. It's easy to get off track. It's easy to adopt somebody else's values and not even know it.
Wow, really, really insightful response there, Genevieve. So, for the entrepreneur listening right now who is having those sleepless nights and feels like they are they are failing because they aren't hitting their numbers. So, what's the first step they can take today to start mapping their own resilience?
Yeah, it really has, they got to take a step back and they really have to look at, am I sure that the work that I'm doing aligns with what I value the most? If the answer is yes, then I would say then your next step is to understand that you have to learn from your failure. So when someone isn't hitting their numbers, they which is not unusual. It's not unusual, especially if you're new at something. But what you have to do then is you've got to look at your processes and ask yourself, what am I not potentially doing enough of, or with enough intention, or with the right mindset? So if you're showing up and you're struggling instead of growing, chances are pretty good there's just something in your process that you don't know that you don't know. And I would tell them, Find somebody that can help you walk through that process. Find somebody that's done it before and let them tell you what potentially you're not seeing. I'll give you a quick story. It's Christmas time, right? At the time of this, we're kind of heading into Christmas, and we have had an artificial tree for as long as I can remember. I've never enjoyed decorating this tree. They're hard to put up, they're hard to decorate, if you ask me, and the lights never seem to work all the time. So I actually was scrolling on Instagram and I saw somebody say, how easy it is to do a Christmas tree when you decorate it one layer at a time. So you put that first base on, you make sure all the lights work, you put your new lights on if you need them, you decorate that first level, then you put on the second level, and then you do the same thing. And I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that I didn't know there was a far more efficient and enjoyable way to decorate the Christmas tree. So it's I know that's like an unrelated but related example, but that significantly improved my Christmas tree decorating experience this year. I was like, "Oh my gosh, my hands weren't as scratchy. It took a lot less time. I was a lot less frustrated." So now in my brain now says, "Huh, maybe decorating the Christmas tree is more fun than I thought it was." And that's really the game that people need to play when they have to do something at work that isn't their favorite. It's like, well, how do we make this thing fun and enjoyable? Because as long as you don't like doing it, you're going to have a hard time showing up and being your best.
All right, great response there, Genevieve. So, for you, after navigating the frustrations of entrepreneurship and helping others build long-term stability, so what does being successful truly mean to you now?
Yeah. Successful to me means, honestly and truly, it means being in a state of God's love and flow and connecting with other people in a loving way. And, it's so funny because people are like, well, that's not business. I'm like, it is business. It is business because if you don't love the people you work with, if you don't love the customers that you're dealing with, if you're chronically in a state of panic or anxiety, you're never going to have a good time. And for me, this ability to show up with what I call a calm confidence that I'm at the right place at the right time. I am talking to the people who I'm supposed to be talking to and really settling into the fact that my success lies in not feeling like I need to show up, but I don't need to control every part of my day.
So yeah, this has been a really real and helpful conversation, Genevieve. So, for our listeners who want to learn more about resilience mapping or check out your other resources, so where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, they can go to gscory.com. That's my website. Or they can find me on any social media platform at Genevieve_Skory. I'm there, I'm busy, I'm responding to those messages, and they can give me a follow and they can get more of this kind of conversation.
All right, it's been a really great time talking to you, and I'm indeed excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Me too.